Welcome to The Debate. Today we are examining one of the most ambitious infrastructure and sporting projects of the 21st century. I'm talking about the Shanghai International Circuit and the Chinese Grand Prix. Back in 2004, the Formula One ecosystem witnessed this massive transformation of an actual marshland in the Jiading district into a state-of-the-art facility, and it was constructed in just 18 months at a staggering cost of $450 million.
Right. A massive undertaking.
Absolutely. And the central question we are exploring today is this: has the Chinese Grand Prix successfully fulfilled its mandate as the cornerstone of Formula One's eastward global expansion? Or has its legacy been defined more by commercial volatility and chaotic on-track anomalies?
Yeah, that's the real crux of it.
Right. Now, our discussion today emerges directly from the historical records, financial reports, and race summaries of the Chinese Grand Prix over the last 2 decades. I will be arguing that the race stands as a monumental triumph of strategic expansion in sporting history.
And I will be contending that it is a commercially fraught experiment, one whose prestige relies heavily on unpredictable weather and, well, driver errors.
It really is a fascinating subject.
It is. Largely because the narrative surrounding the Chinese Grand Prix so often obscures the empirical reality of its existence. When we strip away the massive marketing apparatus, we are left with an event whose legacy is in many ways highly inflated.
Look, let's start by establishing the framework for why this circuit is undeniably a foundational pillar of modern Formula One. The Chinese Grand Prix represents the perfect execution of Bernie Ecclestone's vision to unlock the massive Chinese market. At the turn of the millennium, Formula One was a largely, a Eurocentric sport. So committing $450 million to build the Shanghai International Circuit was a profound statement of intent. And that prestige has endured over the decades. It's no coincidence that when Formula One reached its historic 1,000th Grand Prix in 2019, Shanghai was selected to host it. Furthermore, the recent contract extension, securing the race on the calendar until 2030, proves its indispensable status.
Okay, but
Just to finish the thought on the facility itself, beyond the strategic triumph, the circuit is an architectural masterpiece. Hermann Tilke designed a layout inspired by the Chinese character Shang, meaning upwards, and that translates into one of the most technically demanding tracks on Earth. The 270-degree tightening turn 1 and 2 complex is a true crucible for driver skill and aerodynamic efficiency, and it organically generates legendary moments in the sport.
I appreciate the architectural romanticism. I really do. But the historical and financial records paint a far less triumphant picture. The legacy of the Chinese Grand Prix is, frankly, a facade masking a deeply unstable commercial reality, one that is salvaged only by freak weather conditions.
Unstable?
Yes. If we look at the financial friction, it is severe. By November 2008, so just 4 years after that massive initial investment, senior race official Qu Weichong was publicly suggesting that the money-losing race might be canceled altogether.
Well, early jitters are.
And it didn't stop there. By 2011, the organizers were actively refusing to pay the exorbitant hosting fees, which led to severe contract delays until Formula One bosses were actually forced to reduce their financial demands. That is not the behavior of a healthy cornerstone event. Furthermore, I contend that the track's most famous moments are not products of intrinsic track brilliance.
They certainly are.
Let's look at them. Michael Schumacher's final win in 2006, Lewis Hamilton's catastrophic pit lane disaster in 2007, Red Bull's maiden victory with Sebastian Vettel in 2009. These were all products of extreme rain, drastic tire degradation, and massive driver mistakes. The weather has been the architect of Shanghai's legacy, not Hermann Tilke.
I think we need to separate the early financial growing pains from the ultimate strategic result. Every major international expansion faces initial friction.
I come at it from a different way when we look at this concept of a cornerstone. A true foundational race, a pillar of a global sporting enterprise, does not rack up year after year financial losses, nor does it require the sports executives to slash hosting fees just to prevent its total collapse, which is precisely what happened during those 2011 negotiations. If the market penetration was as successful as the initial $450 million investment intended, the event would have been financially self-sustaining right out of the gate, rather than acting as a subsidized loss leader for the local government.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the economics of global sporting expansion. Early financial friction is entirely natural and frankly expected when attempting to penetrate a massive, entirely new market like China. You're citing the 2008 and 2011 financial anxieties which occurring during the fallout of a massive global financial crisis, I might add.
Fair point, but
But you have to look at the long-term strategic play. That $450 million facility was not built for a 5-year return on investment. It was a generational commitment. And that commitment has now stabilized and borne fruit. Look at the 2024 return of the event. We saw the inclusion of China's first Formula One driver, Zhu Guanyu, racing in his home Grand Prix, bringing an unprecedented local passion to the stands.
he did draw a great crowd.
Exactly. And we see the event expanding to include a sprint race for the 2025 season. Just to contextualize that for a moment, getting one of only 6 sprint races is a massive commercial endorsement. It means the organizers get to sell 3 full days of high-stakes competitive racing tickets, instead of relying solely on Sunday's Grand Prix. Formula One management and the event organizers have locked this race in until 2030. That level of enduring investment completely validates the initial financial growing pains.
Investment is one thing, but what are we actually getting for it? You bring up the sporting product, and this is where the cornerstone argument really starts to fray for me.
The financial investment is validated by the fact that the circuit itself organically produces legendary Formula One history. You cannot separate the track from the events that occur on it. Michael Schumacher's final, masterful victory in 2006 happened here. Lewis Hamilton, arguably the greatest driver of his generation, has won here a record 6 times. The sheer competitive excellence of the 2016 race, won by Nico Rosberg amidst the chaotic field where Hamilton fought his way from the back of the grid, proves that the circuit's layout fundamentally encourages dynamic, aggressive racing. The track layout forces drivers into complex strategic decisions that inevitably produce drama. It's not just a track, it's a crucible.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are giving the track credit for what was basically just crazy weather and terrible pit wall decisions. Let's deconstruct those historic moments you just cited. Because if you look closely, the circuit layout was largely incidental.
Incidental?
Yes. The 2006 race was entirely dictated by a drying track. It was a strategic gamble regarding the crossover point between intermediate and dry tires. Ferrari kept Schumacher out while Alonso and Renault struggled with the changing conditions. The variable was water, not the corners. Now let's look at 2007. Probably the most famous incident in the track's history. I still remember watching that live, seeing a world championship literally slip away at 15 miles per hour into a tiny patch of gravel. It was agonizing.
Heartbreaking for McLaren fans, certainly.
But Lewis Hamilton losing the championship there was not a triumph of track design. It was a product of McLaren leaving him out on slick tires that were worn completely down to the canvas until they lost all structural integrity. And as for 2009, Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel's historic maiden win required monsoon conditions. It was so incredibly wet that the race had to literally start behind a safety car because visibility was virtually zero from the rooster tails of spray. And every single one of these defining historical markers, freak weather or catastrophic tire degradation, was the true catalyst.
That is an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Weather affects every circuit on the global calendar. It rains in Spa, it rains in Silverstone, it rains in Suzuka. But not every circuit translates changing conditions into thrilling racing. The reason the 2006 and 2007 races were so dramatic is specifically because of the aerodynamic demands and tire wear characteristics of the Shanghai layout.
You're saying the track exacerbates the weather?
Precisely. This track is uniquely punishing on the front left tire. Why? Because the track features endless long radius right-handers like turn 1 and turn 13. All the aerodynamic load and friction is forced onto that outside left tire for seconds at a time, basically melting the rubber. So when you add rain or a drying track to a circuit that already pushes tires to their absolute thermal limit, you get massive strategic divergence. The track design creates the vulnerability, the weather just exploits it. But even taking weather out of the equation entirely, the track design is an objective triumph of infrastructure. Consider the 1.2-kilometer straight between turns 13 and 14. It is one of the longest on the calendar, culminating in a massive braking zone directly in front of Grandstand K. It was purposefully designed to overlook maximum overtaking opportunities. We saw the brilliance of this layout in totally dry conditions in 2018 when Daniel Ricciardo secured his victory with a breathtaking, brave dive bomb pass on Valtteri Bottas at turn 6. The circuit provides the canvas for these maneuvers.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered how fleeting the prestige of that infrastructure actually was? You championed the $450 million price tag as a monument to its grandeur, but within just 5 years of Shanghai opening, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix opened the Yas Marina circuit with a facility costing an astronomical $6 billion. The Shanghai circuit's status as the ultimate state-of-the-art crown jewel was obliterated almost immediately by Middle Eastern expansion. It suddenly looked quite dated.
Well, $6 billion is an anomaly.
Furthermore, we absolutely must address the logistical reality of the infrastructure. The track was built on a marshland in Jiading. It requires a 60-minute ride on the Line 11 metro just to reach the circuit from the dynamic, sprawling Pudong district.
I don't see why the commute negates the racing product.
Because it completely kills the atmosphere. Imagine building a crown jewel sporting arena, but putting it so far out in the suburbs that fans have to take an hour-long subway ride away from all the hotels, restaurants, neon lights, and nightlife of downtown Shanghai. The actual cultural and economic life of the city exists in Pudong and along the Bund. Because the tract is geographically isolated, it creates a massive disconnect between the vibrant city it claims to represent and the localized experience of attending the race. It lacks that incredible festival vibe that Formula One successfully builds in cities like Singapore or Austin. It feels less like an integrated city event and more like a quarantined exhibition.
I think calling it a quarantined exhibition is a bit harsh, especially given the sheer volume of fans that pack those grandstands.
But this sense of the race being a peripheral, almost isolated exhibition was never more apparent than during its 4-year disappearance. From 2020 through 2023, the Chinese Grand Prix was entirely absent from the calendar due to the COVID-19 pandemic. While traditional core European races found ways to adapt and return to the schedule quickly, despite global challenges, we saw the sport go to places like Mugello, Portimao, Istanbul. China remained conspicuously absent.
Right, but those were unique.
Plans for 2021, 2022, and 2023 were announced and subsequently canceled. Any historical momentum the event had built up, particularly after hosting that massive 1,000th Grand Prix in 2019, was completely halted. A true foundational race does not simply vanish for 4 consecutive seasons while the rest of the sport marches forward without missing a beat.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it completely ignores the unprecedented macroeconomic and public health realities of that specific period, which were entirely out of the sport's control. Yes, the 4-year absence was a setback, but you are framing it as a loss of relevance. The empirical evidence from its return proves the exact opposite. Formula One didn't just move on and forget about China, it waited.
Waited because of contractual obligations.
Waited because of the market value. Look at the 2024 race, won by Max Verstappen, and the 2025 race, won by Oscar Piastri, with Lando Norris setting the fastest lap. The return of the event demonstrated massive fan demand and an undeniable market resilience. Millions of fans across the country tuned in. The grandstands weren't just full, they were absolutely electric. The emergence of a native driver in Zhou Guanyu catalyzed the local audience in a way that fully realized the sport's original 2004 vision. Watching him break down in tears on the grid in front of his home crowd was one of the most powerful images of the modern era.
It was a great moment.
It was, and the fact that the race could disappear for 4 years and then instantly reestablish itself as a commercially vibrant, highly attended event complete with a massive new title sponsorship from Lenovo in 2024 proves that it is not peripheral. It is a deeply embedded, highly anticipated fixture of the modern championship.
The return certainly drew a crowd, I won't deny that. But a crowd eager for a novelty after a 4-year drought does not automatically equate to structural health. The fact remains that those 4 years exposed how easily the sport could survive and indeed thrive without the Shanghai International Circuit. The European heartland sustained the sport when the eastward expansion fractured. A cornerstone is something the structure cannot stand without. Formula One proved it could stand just fine without Shanghai.
Well, to summarize my position on this incredibly complex topic, the Chinese Grand Prix represents a bold, fundamentally successful leap into a vital global market. Despite early financial hurdles and unprecedented logistical interruptions, it has secured its future through 2030. It boasts a technically brilliant track that has hosted some of the most consequential, thrilling, and heartbreaking races of the 21st century. It stands as a testament to long-term strategic vision in international sports.
And my contrasting view remains that the race's legacy is inherently one of financial precariousness and commercial struggle. Its most celebrated moments, from Hamilton's agonizing pit lane slide to Vettel's maiden win for Red Bull in the monsoon, largely serve as monuments to extreme weather and tire degradation, rather than any inherent brilliance of the event's design. The venue has spent much of its existence fighting for relevance, geographically isolated from the city it represents.
However, I think we can both acknowledge a clear point of convergence today. Regardless of whether one attributes it to the asphalt, the tire degradation, or the atmosphere, the Shanghai International Circuit has undeniably delivered deeply memorable sporting history. And purely from an engineering standpoint, that tightening 270-degree turn 1, winding endlessly like a snail shell and starving the cars of grip, remains a unique, demanding marvel in motorsport.
I will certainly concede that Turn 1 demands a level of patience and technical precision from the drivers that is rarely seen elsewhere on the calendar. And there is immense value in analyzing these modern sporting expansions through both an economic and historical lens. The complexities of the 2000s Formula One calendar offer a truly fascinating study in globalization.
Indeed. We highly suggest our listeners continue to explore the rich history of this era of motorsport themselves. Thank you for joining us for this rigorous exchange of ideas.